Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the State Department. Who's back from the G20? All right, well, welcome back. Hope you had a good trip over there. I would like to welcome some students that we have in the back row. So again, keep it clean when we have guests. They're from Georgetown Day School. So welcome to the State Department. Great to have you here today, and they're studying international affairs. So thank you for coming. Got a few pieces of business to address first today, and the first is an announcement that we made over the weekend, but we're really pleased with it, so I wanted to highlight it for you again. We've talked a lot about the 4 famines in Africa, and so I wanted to tell you about a USAID big chunk of change that has gone to that effect. On Saturday, the United States announced nearly $639 million in additional humanitarian assistance to the millions of people affected by food insecurity and violence in South Sudan, Nigeria, Somalia, and also Yemen. With the new assistance, the United States is providing additional emergency food and nutrition assistance, life-saving medical care, improved sanitation, emergency shelter, and protection for civilians who have been affected by conflict, including those displaced internally and also refugees. The United States is also providing safe drinking water and supporting hygiene and health programs to treat and prevent disease outbreaks for all the 4 crises, including in Yemen, which is experiencing the world's largest cholera outbreak. The United States is the largest single donor of humanitarian assistance around the world. The aid we provide represents the best of America's generosity and its goodwill. Today marks, actually Sunday marked, the 2-year anniversary of the launch of China's government nationwide campaign of intimidation against defense lawyers and also rights defenders. The State Department remains deeply concerned about the continued detention of at least 7 defense lawyers and rights defenders and reports of their alleged torture and denial of access to independent legal counsel. We urge the Chinese authorities to immediately release those still in detention and drop the charges, and also allow them to reunite with their families. We urge the Chinese authorities to view lawyers and rights defenders as partners in strengthening Chinese society through the development of the rule of law. And finally, I'd like to announce something that's taking place here at the State Department, a busier place than usual today. There is a meeting of the Global Coalition to Defeat ISIS that's underway this week. Today, members of the Global Coalition to Defeat ISIS are in Washington for the first of 3 days of meetings on the next phase of the campaign. The meetings come at a key moment in the fight against ISIS, just as Mosul has been liberated. The coalition's working groups on stabilization support, counterfinance, foreign terror fighters, and counter-messaging are convening to evaluate the progress and also discuss how to build upon momentum that are achieved in each of those areas. Tomorrow, representatives of the 72-member coalition will participate in a day of workshops to share the best practices to ensure that we maintain simultaneous pressure on ISIS across the globe. On Thursday, senior diplomats at the coalition's small group will meet to build on the work of the previous day's meetings. They'll also talk about future priorities, coordinate efforts to continue setting ISIS on an irreversible path to defeat. Just as ISIS is working to survive, we are dedicated and committed to defeating ISIS. And with that, I'll take your questions.
Can we go to Qatar?
Sure, let's start in Qatar. Hi.
Can you update us on the latest efforts by Secretary Tillerson? And I know we saw the statement that was issued, and he basically said, quoted to have said, that the Qatari position is reasonable. Could you elaborate on that?
So the secretary was in, I'm sorry, UAE. No, he was in. He's based in Kuwait and has had a few series of trips. He went to Doha today to talk to the leaders there, and he will travel to Saudi Arabia tomorrow, and that's where he'll meet with the Saudis, the Emiratis, the Egyptians, and also the Bahraini officials. An important piece of news to announce is that we worked out an arrangement with the Qataris, separate from the Qatar feud, if you will. And this is something we're pretty proud of, and this is something that the president has made a major initiative of his that was worked out at the Riyadh conference. And that is the Qataris and the United States have signed a memo of understanding between the United States and Qatar on counterterrorism financing. So some of the details, I understand, are still being worked out at this hour. The secretary was pleased to be able to announce that piece of work today.
Do you see this as paving the way for Qatar to go back into the good stead of the other 4 countries that cut off relations with it?
We certainly hope so. We know that all of those countries, as we talked about in Riyadh, share the concern about ISIS, the global terror network, and they recognize that we are all stronger when we are working together and coordinating in the fight against ISIS. So we believe that this memo of agreement between the United States and Qatar is a good first start to get that underway.
Initially, what we heard from the Saudis was kind of take it or leave it. Here are our demands. So how would you say that through the course of the Secretary's meetings, the willingness level has changed or hasn't among the other countries besides Qatar?
So I know that the countries and the Secretary are committed to trying to work this through and come to a resolution. It's been more than a month now. We've continued to ask them to do that. I think those nations all understand the concern and the importance to work together to come to a resolution on this.
And Tillerson's spokesperson during part of this trip had said, when he was talking to reporters, that there are no clean hands here. Was he talking about Saudi Arabia, or what? Can you clarify that?
I think I know what you're referring to. I think when he referred to no clean hands, what he was talking about, and I wasn't there for this, but I think what he was talking about is that all parties can do a lot more to work together, that all of the nations have issues that they need to address and work together on, and I think that this new counterterrorism financing and funding initiative that the Secretary was able to announce today with the foreign minister of Qatar is a good first place to start.
And when you said that some of those demands were just completely untenable, but some could be workable, can you give a little more detail on what he was talking about?
So I'm not going to characterize any of the specific demands, but we know overall from taking a look at the initial lists and subsequent lists that some of the things would be harder for certain nations to do than others. Some of them would frankly not be workable for some of those nations. I'm not going to point out the specifics. That's for each of those nations to look at and highlight themselves, but we're hoping that they will come to an agreement on this. Hi.
Heather, State and Qatar have described this agreement that they signed today as a separate agreement, that process that had begun in Riyadh before this blockade began. But given that the most cited grievance that these countries have against Qatar has to do with terrorist financing, and this is a terrorist financing agreement, could you characterize this as linked or as a breakthrough